Welcome back to the channel. I've extended the baseboard that I showed in previous videos by 600mm, and I'm taking you through on this video the same processes but slightly different on the lower section where the right hand red tub is. I'm now concentrating my efforts on the lower level and in particular forming a rock face. If I just spin around a little bit here, this will be the continuation of the 4-foot gauge Padan railway. On this baseboard I'm proposing, and I will be putting, a building, a derelict slate building, slate block building I should say. And here it is. I'll put it in the place where I intend to put it. There. Now you can see it's better an angle, and behind it here I've set some mod mesh readiness to make a rock face and an embankment down here. This building, I must say, is very old. It was built by a late friend of mine called, his name was Bryn Lewis, and he built an 016-5 layout called Raven's Rock, which I exhibited for many years after his death on the exhibition circuit, having rebuilt it after it had basically fallen into disrepair in his home long after he died. His widow left it because she couldn't bring herself to clear it from the room, and then eventually she cleared it and I purchased it from her and rebuilt it all and took it out on the circuit. He was a very, very good modeller, and he ventured into 16mm using the system that he had used in 7mm 016-5, and that is to use on here. These are all ABS plastic cut into little blocks and stuck on a framework. And the same thing applies. You can see, I don't want to see in there, but if I turn that round, you see the detail he's put in there. And in his memory, I've decided that I would put it on Gilfach Wen. It has to have a little bit of modification to it. I've got to do some repairs. As you can see, there is a ridge tile or two missing, and also on the chimney here there's a couple of slates missing off of there. I will put those in before it goes out onto public display. But as you can see, I'm going to be putting it there, and it'll be a fitting tribute to Bryn and his modelling prowess. He died quite a few years ago, as I say, probably, I'm just thinking now, maybe 10, 12 years ago. Maybe a bit more than that actually, but nonetheless his work still lives on, and I still own Raven's Rock, currently in store, but I will bring it out at some point when I'm able to. But in the meantime, I will continue to do the rock face along here. I'll take the building out of the way, and you can see me how I build up the rock on here using the decorative plaster. And you can see it's very, very thick, actually probably a little bit too thick, but I'll probably just put a little bit of water with that and break it down a little bit. There is PVA glue in this mix, and I always recommend that when doing rock faces and on flat areas such as this, because it helps the adhesion, and actually the decorative plaster will go a lot harder and not crumble if not. So I'm going to butter a bit on there, and what I try to do is model the rock whilst the plaster is wet, so, or even damp, because I find that by doing that I'm able to get a better finish. And if you, I should say, I can't even get my mouth to work properly now. Classic Tony. If you do it in the dry, you've got to cut it all and it makes a hell of a mess. Dust everywhere. And I don't think you get such a nice finish. But that's just me, I suppose. My experiences tell me that. And it suits my modelling needs rather well. So that is the baseboard end that I'm doing for this. This will be the end baseboard on Gilfach Wen, and then I'll continue that round on a single little bridge because I can walk between the layout as such, and I can lift that little section out. So I've got a continuous run on Gilfach Wen, which is what I'm aiming to do. Now you can see it's coming together and starting to take shape. Well, I will let that dry a little bit before I actually start to do any rock features. And there will be quite a few on the layout eventually because it's in a quarry, and I should be trying to replicate or represent the slate and the rock that those hardy Welsh quarrymen and stonemen mined out and quarried out over the very hard terrain and in harsh weather conditions. I can't believe how those guys did what they did under a lot of injuries and a lot of deaths. Yes, I know, but I mean, what strength they had. Mind you, I suppose they had to do it because there was no other employment in the area at the time. So I'm led to believe a lot of them came off the farmland in the early days and started working in the quarries because the money was better. God knows how much better, but they must have been pretty bad conditions. Well, they knew they were very bad conditions. But as you can see, the decorative plaster is now sticking to the mod mesh. And then the mod mesh, as I've said on numerous occasions, acts as a framework. The plaster will go through the mesh and form a key behind the mesh. So it's all bonded together, and the mesh, if you like, becomes like a reinforcement. It's aluminium, so you're able to bend it according to how you want it to look, as I've done here. I've got a slight overhang. I know that's going to be sitting behind the building, but if I decide to take the building off, I've still got a bit of scenery there that I haven't got to modify. So that's the idea or the thinking behind this particular piece of work. So having completed the plastering of the mod mesh, you see here how I've worked the palette knife through the plaster. I've actually given the sterling board, which is this stuff here, a bit of a coat of plaster, decorative plaster, which is very thin, and you can see I can still paint it because it's not dry yet, it's still wet. And the idea of that is to give a foundation for anything else I'd like to put on there, like grass and so on and so forth. And I just stipple it a little bit just to make sure I've got hardly any brush marks in it when it dries. But on the main piece of this scenery is this rock face. If I come in close, you can see where the palette knife has been. And when all this dries here, as I said earlier, I'll scrub it with a toothbrush. And I should proceed then to paint it with watercolours, which are my chosen colorant, if you like. I'll just one or two bits there to work in there. So a nice little ledge there. And the idea of that is so I can put a bit of grass on it. So that's a little bit of a rock sticking out there, and I can probably get a little bit of a sharp edge to that. Well, actually, not too much of a sharp edge because this is quite old. It's been here quite a few years, not the model, but I'm trying to represent that worn rock. The weather has got to it, taking the sharp edges off, which is what basically, if I have any sharp edges or burrs, as I like to call them, I'll knock those off with the toothbrush, of course. And as I said earlier, you know, I've got the stratas, if you like, going up like so. So they're rising, as is over the back here. So it all flows naturally, as Mother Nature would do. As the bedrock has been laid down and the earth has moved, so this has moved with it, obviously. And compressed and compressed and pressed and pressed and pressed down till you end up with slate. And yeah, and then man comes along, cuts it out and uses it on his roof, and in buildings, of course, and on walls, and on stone, roadways, I beg your pardon, and also in makeup, because Penryn, they have fullersite, which is powdered slate. And the fullersite was used, and I think it still is. Now you can see how that looks now. Just a little bit of work, and it certainly comes to life. And I've got, this is too crummy here. And by that I mean it's too many small pieces, so I'm going to smooth it off. Here, for instance, you've got a rounded piece. Well, I'll just flatten the top of that off and sharpen it just a little bit there. I know it's only small areas in the great scheme of things, but in actual fact, eventually, the eye will see that as nothing other than a slate rock, which is what we're trying to represent face. And as you can see, it's not looking too bad. It's a little bit sort of, wants a little bit smoothing off there. There we go. And you see this piece here. I'll leave that to dry and I'll scrub that over with the toothbrush when it's dry. There we go. Well, there we are. I hope you've enjoyed this little video. I'm going to be carrying on, and I shall video further when I come to paint this, and you'll see how it will change from being just a grey face to a more natural looking rock face. So there we go, through there and up through there, and here probably I'll have a little bit of water, a little bit of green. That will be represented with varnishes painted onto the finished article. I just noticed that there. You never really finish, you just see little bits that you've missed. The decorative plaster is now sufficiently dry enough for me to rub the old toothbrush across the surface, and you can see I've done a little bit here, and it does take those little nibs off. Around here. And it's starting to really take shape now, as I keep saying, but I do enjoy this part of my modelling. Well, actually I enjoy all of it really, but this is particularly satisfying for me. I can't do all this sort of work out in the garden because it wouldn't last 5 minutes out in the wide blue yonder, but it will in here look quite spectacular, I think. I'm going to just take the surface of that off with a toothbrush, and that should dry back quite quickly actually. But there we are. I'm not pushing very hard with the toothbrush, I'm just lightly scrubbing it, if you like. You can see all these bits down here. Doesn't look bad, I'm quite happy with that. Now we'll move on when it's all dry to painting it.